Hey, thanks for listening to the UDRcast. If you appreciate this kind of in-depth conversation and insight into recovery, make sure to sign up as a member. Most of our members pitch in $5 or $10 a month, the price of a few coffees. To make this happen, you can sign up at the website at BILLWARD.life.
The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome, everybody, to the UDR cast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at billward.life and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Hello there. So here we are. We're back with another session of UDR. Today we got my good brother Jesse P. You guys know him from What the Fuck Are We Talking About? And today we have a special guest, Dale S. He's going to join us today. Dale's got a bit of history in the program, and he's back again. He's been digging in, and we've connected quite a bit over the last number of months. He's really tuned in to trying to do this in a different way, in a good way, and so we're here to try to answer some questions and see what Dale brings to the table for questions, and maybe some of his own insight into recovery, into sponsorship, as he's brand new into sponsorship again here. So Dale, I'd like you to introduce yourself and say hello.
Yeah, my name's Dale. My last initials S, and I just wanted to say thanks for having me around. It's kind of a surprise, and I mean middle of the afternoon, but I'm excited. I've listened to a lot of the stuff that you guys have put out, and yeah, just excited to be here.
Awesome to have you here. And Jess, same old. What's going on with you, bro?
Oh, whole hell of a lot. I think it's been a little while since we've done this, so it's nice to be back at the microphone here and gonna bang out some more content and see what we can't get out of this session. Was just kind of shooting the shit with Dale a little bit here about sponsorship. He's a newer sponsor, like as green as they come, and a lot of questions out of that, and maybe even some a little bit of his histories that we'll get some more questions out of that. So it should be a good session. Should be able to get some good info for anybody who needs recovery info. So
Okay. Dale, why don't you give us a little background on like your history? Your first stint in the program, maybe coming back, a little short and sweet, and then we'll kind of bust into it. But just to give our listeners a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, sure. So I got sober the first time 2007, March 1st, 2020, 2007. And anyways, and it was in a small town, right? So same group, same 20 people in the town, and I got a sponsor and did the steps and all that, but that carried me through. But I mean, knowing what I know now and picking up what I know now after having to go back out and being at a spot where I understand alcohol. Like I was sponsoring people before too, right? So being at the spot where I couldn't like I know all this stuff, and I couldn't get sober. I couldn't stay sober anyways, right? And so I needed something different. I really did, and it was terrifying being at that spot, going to meetings, drunk sometimes, and going to meetings getting pissed off there because I didn't hear the message that I knew was supposed to be the message, right? And then going and getting drunk right after that. It was a mess. It was really scary, and eventually I went right into Renfrew. Had to that full surrender, and went through a treatment center here in Calgary, and I literally went in there, feeling like the solution was step 12. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a whole bunch of people in here that I can give this message to, right? Like, just really had a hard time. And then a counselor told me, like, dude, guys like this, you're gonna kill yourself trying to save other people. Like, you need a new experience with this. And he challenged me. He said, I challenge you straight up. And it's going to take a massive amount of humility, but you need to absolutely not be quoting the big book or relying on any information that you have regarding Alcoholics Anonymous at this point. And it was difficult, and I literally started crying after it, because I was holding on to that as part of my identity, my and having to unravel that was very difficult. But I'm here and I'm sober, and I feel like I'm really enjoying the message that I'm getting here in Calgary and from you fine gentlemen, and yeah, just I'm throwing myself at it, committed to doing this again. So that's all really I'll say.
Okay. You reminded me of something that I've heard Jesse say a few times on the podcast, and he'd come to meetings and he'd be more ready to drink than when he got there.
Yeah.
And so obviously, I'm assuming you're hearing a bit of a different message. What's the difference between what you were doing or what you heard and what you've heard here, or even what you've heard here? Is it spotty? Is it hard to find? Or what's the difference, and how hard is it to find? And
Well, a lot of it to me kind of comes down to, like, a lot of it is opinionated, or it's just really, like, people say it's watered down or whatever, right? Like, the guy knows enough about what we're talking about to say his opinion on it, but it doesn't actually have any of his own experience attached to the literature, and so it just ends up being just a shitty version of what's in the big book, and it's wrong most of the time.
So would you say it's more of a theory than actual experience or practical application?
That, yeah. And well, yeah, exactly that. But also too, like, it's just not presented well. Like, nobody's really had to dig at it for very long. Like, we were at that meeting tonight, right? And we're talking about step 10, and you're going through it in the way that, like, I understood that. And I remember the conversation having a conversation with you and being in tears almost at that meeting. And it was late at night, and I'm looking for some guidance or something. And you're asking me, well, how many times a day are you doing step 10? And do you remember what I said? I said, like, 50. And you right away were like, okay, like, you're doing it. Right. And to me, like, this idea of this, and I literally, while I was going through that and sharing about it in a vulnerable way, because this is what I'm dealing with. I'm at a men's meeting one night, and a guy comes up to me, and he's telling me not to be so hard on myself. He's saying, have you read 417? Right? Like, you just got to start accepting some things. And I'm fucking pissed right off. Like, like, first, you didn't even ask me if I wanted your opinion on this. You're just coming with your 30 years and telling me, because you got 30 and I'm back at it. But I literally had to check myself, and because I'm arguing, like, he thinks we're arguing between him and I, and I'm sitting here going, man, I'm not arguing with you. I'm arguing with my instinct to completely annihilate you in conversation right in front of everybody here right now, because that is not what it means, right? And until I accepted my alcoholism, I couldn't stay sober. Till I can accept my selfishness and see it on a regular basis, I'm not going to act selflessly, and so just things like that, Bill, and just a lot of opinion stuff, and it really, it really just gives the wrong message of this, because I was the kind of alcoholic what was literally, once I started, like, when I finished, I know that I was trying to kill myself with alcohol. Once I started, that allergy kicked off, and I was in a blackout state, purchasing alcohol off the internet continuously for 9 days at a time, and, like, the whole thing. Like, but I was that kind of way, that the real deal, the real alcoholic, like it talks about, right? And so coming in and feeling like I used to know what the message is and where is it, or having somebody say, I'll sponsor you, and I'm like, okay, we got to do step 1 here, so can we do that? And he opens his calendar and he's flipping through it, and in 3 weeks we'll be able to start. And I'm like, well, can you come get me from the hospital? Because fuck, like, I'm dying here. I'm literally, I know that I won't make it home without stopping at the liquor store, and that's the kind of stuff, right? Like, just not people not being at a spot of I'm into this for the full thing. And then I'm starting to question whether you actually are an alcoholic. Like, because if you don't need to be doing what I'm trying to do here, and be teaching this stuff, like I'm like, we're not reading the same books, we can't be. And it was really hard, like I said, I was standing there ready to like fist fight this guy because I'm like upset because there's other guys that are coming in here that don't have the understanding that I got because I had this backlog of 14 and a half years in the program. And now his understanding of Alcoholics Anonymous is just start accepting some shit, right? Like, fuck off, man. Like that, you're doing a disservice to the people in here, and not only that, to yourself, because clearly you are not you're not understanding some things, right? So I could go on and on and on, and I don't mean to cut it down, but it took a lot of patience and understanding, and this idea of anonymity too, like having to relearn what anonymity actually means, right? People, you put that topic on the board, and everybody flights off about, oh, I don't care, who knows, and all of a sudden we're talking about anonymity in a way that we just don't tell on somebody else, right? And then having to relearn that through one of your guys, Jesse, right, and having Bryce point that out, and then talking to God and like, help me, I need to understand this thing. It's been presented to me. I found it in one of the pamphlets, right? And it's a message from Bill Wilson talking about it, and he says, yeah, it's for the newcomers, it's critical to keep it secret, right? But when I start getting after it, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, right? Like, that's a pretty profound statement. So there's more to it than just keeping the secret, right? And getting to that spot where he says, right in there, most importantly, it's come to stand for prudence and self-effacement, right? And I'm like, well, what the fuck does self-effacement mean, right? And I looked that up, and all of a sudden it makes sense to me, because I'm at a spot where now I look it up, and the definition of it is the quality of not claiming attention to oneself. And everything clicked for me, Jesse, right? Like, it really made sense. Okay, this is the spiritual foundation of this, because what was going on is I had severed myself from so many people in my life, and I'm drinking and dying alone. And then I come into the meeting, and I don't understand that this is a thing about selfishness, not alcohol, right? And all of a sudden I'm judging everybody in the meeting because I don't know about the step 10 shit that I'm supposed to be doing on a regular basis, frequently and repeatedly, passionately, and knowing it's supposed to be painful. And I'm sitting in here judging everybody, and all of a sudden I'm different, separate, and alone on a fucking pedestal in my own head. And to me, that's what it is, and like having people like Bryce pointed out to me, saying like, you see somebody that's got something, you spot it, you got it, basically. Like you see something you don't like, that's a step 10 opportunity, because it is in you. And not to go on and on, but it was killing me.
Yeah. So Jess, as we've talked before about, this theoretical idea of, his perfect example is, dude, you just need more acceptance. Read 420, 416 to 420 and get more acceptance. And you know what? You're going to be okay. And, these kind of, in my opinion, cockamamie solutions that are based in like a theoretical spiritual principle, which I'm not saying is a wrong idea, but to be able to like manufacture that just because you want to doesn't fucking happen, right?
Just don't drink. Same thing.
Yeah,
Plug
don't
in the
drink.
jug. So
You don't drink and go to meetings. Just a little bit on the anonymity piece, like, what is anonymity if it's not humility, right? I mean, when I look at the practice of anonymity, the spiritual foundation of all of our principles, that is how it's practiced, is that it's still held to the chest. And that's how I've acted and practiced humility for years, right? Is that majority of the shit that goes on in my life or things that I've experienced, whether I'm in the program, in my career, all that stuff, all of it's held to the chest unless it'll serve some good purpose, right? Yeah. If a guy, for example, if a guy's remortgage, like we just had a meeting today to refinance our mortgage here, and so I wouldn't be saying that unless somebody had a question on remortgaging. Other than that, I would not say that at all, right? And that goes for many other things in my life, whether that be career, whether that be relationship, because the first thing, it's not that this guy said acceptance. That's not actually what we're talking about. What we're talking about is how this guy gave you unwarranted advice. That's where it starts. Had he not done that, you never would have heard about the acceptance. And so what is that? Okay, why did he do that? Well, this guy has 30 years. He thinks he knows a fucking thing or two, and he's just going to kind of vomit some absolute fucking nonsense on you. And then if you didn't know anything, you didn't say anything, he just fucks off.
Yeah.
He just gives you that absolute waste of everybody's fucking time, little shot for you. Oh, it's acceptance.
Yeah.
And then fucks right off.
Yeah. And
I mean, the real problem is like time's important. Time's very important only in the way. And most people believe that, if an individual has 30 years, that means 30 years of working the program. That's what one assumes. In actuality, there's a good chance you're looking at maybe 5 years of work in the program. First 10 years, he banged fucking newcomers, got a divorce. The second decade was fucking gambling his dick off, 3 business bankruptcies. And then he actually learned something in the third fucking decade and has been working the program for 5 years. Me and Bill have had these conversations time and time again, and that's the reality. When you see an individual who's actually, scale it back, let's say a decade, and he's been doing this deal for a decade, there's something different about this guy. You can't put your finger on it. Yeah. You know what I mean? But at the very least, what you do know is that you're attracted to him. Now, you might be even, now that attraction might come in different ways. It might even be, the first initial thought could be, fuck this guy. That's very common. Yeah. Fuck this guy. Because in actual practice, humility can very easily be mistaken for pride. It's the same as when you are assertive, it could be mistaken for aggression. And why that is because, as we said before these things, before we turn on the microphones here, when we look at, the world and its people haven't even a nodding acquaintance with humility as a way of life, which is not only is the idea misunderstood, and like misunderstood as in like, in this meeting was on humility, and I had said, call somebody an alcoholic, and then in the same sentence, call them humble, and see which one they get more offended by. Humility as a word and as an ideal means you are weak as far as society is concerned. You are weak. You are servile. You are beneath me. You are, what I mean? It's not showing power, right? So it's misunderstood, but in actuality, it is all the power. Yeah. At least for us in Alcoholics Anonymous, it gives me the power of being aligned properly. Only through being aligned properly can I actually help, right? And so through humility, there is an inner confidence that only is given by God, not by self. That power is limitless. From there, I could help out anyone or anything. Only from that place can I properly help. Right?
And just to add on to the humility thing, like humility is actually within the beholder, right? It's not something that somebody else sees in you, although it can work like that to some degree. If the person really knows who you are, I believe that humility can be seen by people that really know and are working in it themselves. But like Jesse said, certain behaviors can look like something else based on the other person's viewpoint of what it is or where they're at. So humility always lies within the beholder, right? So like you had mentioned earlier that we were at a meeting and I was sharing and you saw daggers, people were throwing daggers,
Oh, yeah.
right? So I'm used to that.
Yeah.
Whether it be daggers behind my back that I hear about later, or whether it's daggers during the meeting, or people will get up and leave the meeting, that doesn't really bother me because it's happened so many times for so long. It's just part of the deal when you walk the path. So what I do is I don't really flinch at that. I don't really care about it because I'm not really talking to the people that aren't listening. I'm only talking to the people that are listening, and a lot of people are listening. And the way that I come across, if you're vibrating at a lower level, you'll think this guy's full of pomp, ego, and fucking pride. But if you understand where I'm coming from, and I understand that you're going to fucking die if you don't hear what fucking cuts you. Jesse talks a lot about, he doesn't remember the guy who fucking shined his shoes. He remembers the guys who fucking cut him, right? And that's not like my intention to go cut you. This is just kind of the way that I've taken my defects that I used to work in for years and years. I've turned them into an asset, and I'm still aligning my personality with basically the will of God so I can bring the message that people can hear. And the evidence, the intelligent agent, to be a spearhead for God's ever advancing creation, is the intelligent agent line means someone who collects information. I've collected enough information through my experience in my own life and the pain that I have felt. And trust me, I fucking felt some fucking pain and recovery. But I also feel other people's pain because I've sponsored so many people. The line in step 10, where our next function is grown understanding and effectiveness, I've grown in understanding and effectiveness in many areas. But I also can't hold hard and fast lines on certain areas. I got to be open-minded to admit that I'm wrong and fucking be willing to learn still. So walking a path of humility is, something to be desired for myself through the processes of what the program has actually taught me. And just quickly on this anonymity thing, right? Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all of our principles, ever reminding us principles before personalities. There's many terms in the program that are misconstrued based on an old idea, a societal belief, or what you think it is, an unreasoning prejudice to a word that you think it means something, but it actually means something else. And when I studied anonymity, it means to be faceless, to be the hole in the donut, essentially, to be nothing. And really, when you look at what the steps do, they take away the selfish, self-centered pride that we act in or have acted in, allows us to get right-sized so that we're actually no better than anybody else. It's kind of like I can introduce myself in a meeting and go, I'm an alcoholic. Does it really matter who the fuck I am? In a sense, right?
Yeah, and just to add to, like, I think it was Jesse was talking about, or maybe it was you, Bill, but the viewpoint that the person has, right? Like me coming into the program again with a small town understanding from years up in northern BC, in the steps there and the way they were presented to me, like the viewpoint that I have is like, it tells us in the book, like, the basic ingredient of humility is a desire to seek and do God's will, right? And so if I'm kind of not understanding that at the beginning, and I'm just kind of getting the message, just accept stuff or just be fucking humble, I'm kind of skipping the whole process there of what's actually important first, right? Like I feel like it's to some degree, after a guy's been in the program for a long time, he's 12-stepped and he's getting out there doing this. It's an indication if he's doing God's work and not telling anybody about it. Okay, that, you know what I mean? Like that's being humble about it, right? But to skip the understanding about the God's work type part of it, it just kind of, it really conflicts in my mind, or it was for me with my step 10 process, because now I'm just self-willing. I just got to be humble, and I skip over my defects and the process of releasing them and having God take them from me, right? So it's kind of, it's such a it's so like polarizing too when you talk about it, right? Like in conversation, there's a lot of layers there, and I feel like it changes as you go through, especially from the beginning to like where you guys are at now, right? So,
well, I'd say, if we're looking at step 10, so you have resentment and fear. And so I'd say for the first while with a guy who's new, it's predominantly all fear for the most part. That's the big fucking thing. Burns the life down to the ground. He's trying to rebuild that with God. A ton of self naturally will come in naturally. This guy has to make up for lost time depending on his age. You know what I mean? So he's going to want that career. He's going to want that woman. He's going to want to make that money back, right? But he's going to have to do that God-centered. A lot of fear comes out of that because now God has to take the reins naturally. There's going to be some resentments mixed in there, right? You look at the selfishness, the selfishness is going to be the defective character. And how I sum that up with the guys I work with is the 7 deadly sins, right? That's what 4, 12, and 12 talks about. most important, at least as far as I'm concerned, out of the four things we watch for is dishonesty. The dishonesty is him being dishonest with himself, naturally. But that dishonesty is the plausible excuse. That dishonesty is the insane and trivial excuse. That is what the book talks about in, the first 3 chapters in regards to one, that's how this man drinks. That's how this man goes off on sex sprees, how this man gambles degenerately. That's how this man does everything, is going to be the dishonesty. So, where the guy really starts doing proper tens and getting around the character is bringing God-centered members in, whether that be pillars, whether that be, their sponsor. That's where they get a start on it. 6 and 7 is great. I mean, if you look at 6 is essentially a step 1 on your defective character. Doesn't give you any fucking solution, lays out the chips, much like 1. The problem with 6, though, is that for the most part, with a new guy, it's all theoretical. Me and Bill have had many discussions on this. It's all theoretical. You go through a 1, especially, like this guy you're talking about who just relapsed. You could fucking clinch a step 1 off a relapse pretty fucking easily, right? But you can't do that with 6. The guy might have some sort of an idea what you're talking about in regards to anger. You're out of all the 7 deadly sins, it's pride that's had the procession. So when you take a guy through 6 and 7, you are illuminating pride above everything. That's really what we want to fucking capture. But that's all it is. You're laying out the chips. You're giving him experience. You're going off the fucking information, right? 7 is you're practicing humility, which you said desire to seek and do God's will. Without the desire to seek and do God's will, and without the practice of humility, you forget about the latter steps. These are the steps that are actually going to keep him sober the rest of his life. If he digs in and doubles down, 10, 11, 12. Without humility, no 10. Simple fact. Yeah. Right? Without fucking humility, you think I'm calling on God? You think I'm doing that 4-step process in the 10? Forget about meditation. Forget about sponsorship. Right? It's 10, 11, and 12. 10, 11, and 12. It's not 1 and 12. Right? It seems to be the alcohol. Well, I mean, the alcoholic's very black and white, right? So it's either he's going to do fucking inventory or he's not, he's balls to the wall inventory or no fucking inventory. Eh? Yeah. He's doing, 1 hour in the morning of meditation or no fucking meditation, right? He sponsors 1,000 guys or no, you know what I mean? It's kind of that bullshit. And he has to get the fuck away from that, When I do a 10, I follow that up with 11. When I do an 11, I follow that up with a 12. Right. And of course, when we start in the program, everything is related to the program. Right. So, when we talk about 12, we always talk about 12 in the terms of sponsorship. And of course, that's where it starts. But honestly, man, 10 years in and that's the main thing. We got some fucking issues. 5 years in, we got to be looking at passions and loves, man. You got to take what you've learned in the program. That has to be scaled. Now we're talking society. We're talking where you volunteer. We're talking about that type of shit. It's so fucking important to scale up. None of that's really possible unless we fucking have some desire to seek and do God's will in the 7. Some desire of humility as a personal virtue, which means we get away from, the aversion to the idea where, I need this to stay alive, blah, 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 all that other shit. That's good. It's necessary, but that's not bringing us into fucking happiness, man. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so once I start to get some benefit out of that, and that clinches because, even, we hear 90 meeting in 90 days, right? We could think that, okay, that's nonsense and blah, blah, blah. The simple fact is, that is somebody's spiritual experience. Whether or not it fucking matches or whatever, there's a lot of things that Bill will say and I'll say that was clinched. Once I learned that 5 years ago, 4 years ago, fucking 7 years ago, whatever, that was a fucking spiritual experience. Once that happened, that locked the fuck down, never wavered, right? So especially in the 6 and 7, I mean, there's been a lot of things like that just because there wasn't anything. I don't remember anything like, talking about 6 and 7 going into a meeting, people are talking about being late. People are talking about swearing. People are talking about like some real fine tuning. And I'm like, dude, you're talking about fucking swearing. You're fucking 3 newcomers in this room right now. This is, we don't drink. I know you're smoking crack. You're talking about being late. Like, dude, that's 10 years, 5 years fine tuning a character. Get rid of the devastating fucking handicaps, brother. What the fuck are you talking? And you see that all over the place. Then you see inconsistencies a lot in the sex conduct. That's where I see the most inconsistencies, where you have a man, he's sponsoring good, blah, blah, blah. But then there's always seems to be questionable shit in the sex conduct where, maybe the guy's dating a woman, he's been sober 10 years and she's been sober 2 and it's off, and it's okay, whatever. And then, you hear a guy's fucking, seems to be good and well-rounded in every respect, but kind of lets his sponsees run in this area because he runs in this area. And you're just like, fuck, that always seems to be the handicap. It's a handicap of most men. The guys you sponsor, that's the way they're going to fucking go. If they don't take the solution found in the book, that's the next fucking solution.
Yeah.
The fucking trim.
The trim.
The trim.
You mentioned something about the aversion to humility. I love how Bill writes in that step 7. Let's get away from our aversion to the idea of humility, meaning being humble. And when you hear of humility in the meetings, everyone says, "Oh, it just means being humble. I got to be humble. I got to be humble." You know what? Like, fuck off with the humility meaning being humble. Like, seriously. The word aversion means intense dislike for. So Bill W. himself is saying, I have an intense dislike for this idea that everyone thinks humility means being humble. Not only is the word often misunderstood, it's intensely disliked. Yeah, it's often misunderstood, right? And, if he also goes on to say, that humility, as he describes it, this desire to seek and do God's will, is the avenue to true freedom of the human spirit. You mentioned something earlier, Dale, about like basically self-willing the principles. Oh, I'm supposed to be nice, so I'm going to be nice. Oh, I'm supposed to be kind, so I'm going to be kind. Oh, I'm supposed to be all these things, so I'm going to self-will this shit. Very similarly to the step 10 where I promptly admit that I'm wrong. So I fucking make a mistake. I rub you the wrong way, and then I go make an amend out of my own guilt. So I am like self-willing these principles all over the place. The problem is it's still based in self, right? Through the processes, through the practical applications of what is in the book, Jesse alluded to 10 and then the 4 and 5 again. Through the 10, I can identify my will. I ask God to remove it. I discuss it with somebody immediately, which is one of the most overlooked pieces because I can't see the shit. In a solitary self-appraisal by myself, on myself, I'll rationalize and justify fucking that newcomer and the whole group of newcomers over the next 3 years. If I'm not like leveling up when talking with a sponsor that's God-centered 12-step and trying to gain in spiritual progress, not perfection. Not using the weasel clause, as my buddy Gord calls it, progress, not perfection. That is a scapegoat in your way out. So through the relinquishment of self in the 10 and resolutely turning my thoughts to someone I can help, I'm actually not getting what I want. Probably fucking 80% of the time, I'm relinquishing what it is that I want, which is where over time, the acceptance is the answer will come about through the practical application. For you to will that shit, good fucking luck. It's like I hear in the program all the time, oh, let it go, just let it go, let it go, let it go. Like, fuck you, let it go. It doesn't just let go because you want it to. And so many people have like pride in between letting it go that they want to let it go because they don't want to be the guy that can't let it go. So they try to fucking intellectually let it go. But then you suppress it and you hide it. And like Jesse said, you're not being honest with yourself. So then it never really goes. So the important pieces of this puzzle is, step 10. Okay, you can't work through it on a step 10. You can't work through it by talking with somebody immediately. And you've tested this for a month or 2 or 3 or 4 and it's not going anywhere. Back to the original literature in the step 4. Let's get it pen to paper. Let's do another step 5 in it. Let's do some inventory, semi-annual house cleans. Let's work on whatever it is continuously. But then the step 6 has to really be understood as the theory, right? Fucking letting this go, letting it go. And how do you let it go? Part of that is seeking the desire to seek and do God's will through service. And like, all of these pieces all have to work like a ball of yarn. They can't work individually. And the ego is the most powerful thing besides God. So if you're working in the ego you're actually amplifying more of the ego's ability to hang on. And what's the biggest problem of the ego? It fucking wants validation. It wants to be accepted. It wants to not be alone. It wants to be a part of. So it'll do anything and everything to be a part of what other people are doing or what other people think. Even so, it's really cunning. It gets pretty cunning, that fucking ego.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, and maybe this is a good time to kind of like segue to like talking about sponsorship and all that stuff, because I feel like my understanding of it is going to be, I mean, it's going to change as I go through all this stuff. Right. But, you know, being at a spot where I'm hearing what you guys are telling me, like this is a disease of self, right? And self can't see self. And so as a sponsor, like it's my like job or duty or responsibility, whatever it is, to help a guy see that, right? And it's such a thing that's difficult to find somebody in the room sometimes that can do that, right? Like we talk about it. I've had guys at my home group too. Like I'll go up and I'll say, I want to do some step 10 stuff with you, and you know, I'm humbling myself and I'm asking him because I need help, right? And he says, yeah, okay, that's good. Like, what are we talking about? And I said, well, selfish. And then the question he asked me is, well, how are you, like, how are you being selfish? And I'm like, what? And he's like, well, what example? Because a lot of people in here will just talk about being selfish because that's what we talk about in AA. But like, it kind of just ends up being buckshot at that point, because if I don't have a target selected for step 10 in how it's failing me, it's not going away. You know, and essentially, like you were saying, Bill, like it's perpetuating that self, because I'm talking about me removing this, you know. And I learned this lesson from one of your guys, Jesse, right? Is Marcus, right? And heard him at a meeting, got his number because I loved the message, called him I've had one conversation with that guy, and he picked up the phone and we started talking about step 10 stuff. And he said one of the worst things that I can do as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous with sobriety is catch myself doing something I shouldn't be doing, or feeling something I shouldn't be saying, or, you know, I catch myself in a defect and then say I should know better and act accordingly, because I skipped the process of God removing it, and it perpetuates self. And however that's going to assert itself, the smallest little thing, if there's people in the meeting that are telling new guys this information in the incorrect way, it's perpetuating their selfishness, you know, and it's just prolonging that slow burn until I've had fucking enough. And I need relief. Like you say, Bill, like I need relief. I need it now. And what's always give it to me? Alcohol, fucking boom. And then wonder why this isn't working. And this is where it comes into me. Like I love the meetings. I really do. And any of the messages that are in there. I mean, you know, if nobody's in there, I don't feel trying to hurt people. Right. But at the end of the day, like I'm the kind of alcoholic that will die to this rapidly, you know, and not only that, but like, you know, going through the life that I've had, the two kids that I've got, you know, I fully expect that they're on their way in here at some point, right? And I mean, I am passionate about it because I would love to have the message be something that is not going to perpetuate their selfishness, because that is the root of it, right? And yeah, like switching into like kind of step 12 or asking about it, like, you know, the sponsorship portion of this, there is a chapter dedicated to it, right? But like Jesse and I were talking about this earlier, like you kind of get your system down, right? And you kind of go through this in a way that's, you know, you learn based off of experience, which at the beginning, like I talked with Jesse, like there is some selfishness involved in this, because I do need to learn this. And part of this is for me, if I'm going to be effective down the road, right? So where do you kind of find that line? Or like, what would you guys say? Or like, you understand what I'm saying? Where do you find that line of like, okay, this is acceptable, and now I'm doing this guy a disservice because I'm learning here as well, right?
Well, like I would say, so what I typically do when I get a guy who's step 12 and he's kicked out of the car and it's go time, if he's having difficulties getting guys, what I used to do when I was to scale, and to scale, what I mean by that is sponsoring anywhere between 8 and 12 guys, is I would get out of those guys, let's say half of them through the 12 steps. Then from there, maybe 3 of those 5 guys needed help. Then we would go through the book again from a sponsor's point of view. And throughout that process, if they still couldn't get guys, then I would bring them on board with one of my guys. Right. So I would pick up a sponsee, and if this guy was really struggling, then we would go through another set of steps with a new sponsee. Minus, always -5. My sponsee's not involved, and this wet guy is 5, and 8 and 9. Right. And then so if it's not that, taking that aside, because that's a little bit of a special case, for the most part, once these guys are given the information and you're able to walk them through, this is the way that I do that for probably 80% of the guys I've ever sponsored. This is the process. They're 12, they're kicked out of the car, they pick up their first guy. What I tell you don't need to learn the fucking book, man. It's every guy thinks this, that I have to have absolutely every fucking answer possible. Get that out of your fucking mind right away. It's nonsense. What that is called pride, right? So cut that the fuck out. Only thing you need to know is the first sit down, right? So what I'll tell my guys is go over the doctor's opinion. Go, not the fluff, go over underlines and double underlines, okay? Which ones do you not understand? Because that's what I want to hear about. You call me based on that. No more than a 20-minute conversation. He has some sort of a base, because it's not all of the underlines and double underlines he doesn't understand. Out of, let's say, maybe 10 in that chapter, there's maybe 3, 4, 5 max that he doesn't understand. Then we just target those. And that's all it is session to session to session. Then all of a sudden, this sponsee's coming up with something that's obscure, something that's fucking wild for him. It could be something basic that me and Bill, have years and years experience with. It could be something a little bit more of an outlier. Then you get your sponsor involved. Calls me, listen, Jess, I got this situation. I got this guy, this is it. I have no fucking idea, right? And it's like, I've heard this 100 times, no big deal, whatever. We go through it and that's how we do it. Like, he's not alone, right? The point is, though, really, the point of the underlines and the double underlines is that if something happens to me, this fucking guy's off the tee. The whole point of the underlines and double underlines, this fucking guy thinks it's about him. Has nothing to do with him, really. At the end of the day, why he's double underlining and underlining and bracketing that book is to sponsor another man. Simple fact. So simply put, even if something were to happen, if I just, like I got a guy coming up on 12 now next week, and if something is to happen to me, he's primed. He's fucking ready to go. He has all the information right there in the book. And maybe if he doesn't remember what that underline means, he at the very least knows that it's important. Knows that he better find some sort of a fucking answer for it. Yeah. So I would say just as a fucking base, that's where you need to be.
And for me, I do it a little differently, but I'm going to say the content that Jesse and I cover is very, very similar. There's different aspects through the full 12 steps that we have different ways of seeing or viewing and of delivering and noting its importance. I think Jesse and I have talked about this. Our biggest difference in our sponsorship is he's setting a guy up for life, practically applied in the world of the material, using a God as his understanding and being a productive member of society and building a good life for him and his family. My take on what I do is I try to really just find the root causes of his problems and try to get him to be his most authentic self, and also doing what he does, but a little bit differently with my own style. So we're a lot alike and a lot, and little bit differences. So part of what I do when I do take a guy through is, it was kind of funny because we spent, we're good friends, but there's been periods of time where we're like 6 months apart and haven't even spoke to each other, or 3 months or whatever it is over these number of years. And it was funny, about year 3 or so, he had been sponsoring pretty heavy. I'd been sponsoring pretty heavy. And we got together and we were just shooting the shit. And I had said to him, and it was kind of like going to set myself and prepare for a little bit of judgment on what I was going to tell. And what I was going to tell him was, I take a guy from basically the doctor's opinion through there's a solution, and I skip Bill's story. Right? Doctor's opinion, Bill's story is supposed to be next. It's right over to there's a solution and more about alcoholism. And it was funny because he had done the same thing in the same period of time. And that's kind of how aligned our sponsorship lives are. We're
taking out certain aspects of the material that we don't think it's that important for the wet alcoholic like yourself who's gonna die, who doesn't have fucking 3 weeks to wait to get to work, right? And based on something Jesse said earlier, as you get to know and use your energetic feeling and get to know alcoholics better, you'll know when to get them from 0 to 4 and 5 like super quick, or when you can take them, one time a week. Sometimes it's twice a week. Sometimes it's like a 0 to 4. Jesse and I have done 0 to 4s and in a night before,
Yeah.
with different people, right? To get them to the 5 so you can get some relief. Once the 5's done, you can have a little breathing room, right? But for me, when I start with somebody, I always start at forward to the first. I always read the first paragraph. I go to forward to the second. I talk about, how imperative it was that one alcoholic helps another. I'm kind of driving home, like we talked about the other day, Dale, the aspect of sponsorship, which brings up, one of your questions that I'm sure you're going to have. But, the aspect of sponsorship through the preliminary aspects of going through the material is something that I hammer home like nonstop. So when we get to the piece in step 1, then how shall we so freely give what has been so freely given to us? Question mark. I ask them the answer to that, and they usually say I sponsor someone, or I take them through the material or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I know I've done my job right if they're answering that question properly. So I go from there to the doctor's opinion. And there's 3 things that I hammer home in the first 2 pages of the doctor's opinion. One is, as part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to others, impressing upon them they must still do likewise with others. Sponsorship. That is hammered home right from the start. And I'll often go right into working with others and read that paragraph. I think it's about 3 pages in from the end of working with others, where it says helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. A kindly act once in a while is not enough. You must act the Good Samaritan every day if need be. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, interruptions to your pleasures, blah, 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 and it goes on. And I emphasize that. Like, this is something that you do, and it will fuck up part of your life, and that's the way that it goes. So that they understand that, because people are like, fuck, I'm not going to do this, and it's interfering with my life. Well, that's the fucking point. It generates more humility. I flip to the second page and I hammer this part home too. We work out our solution on the spiritual and altruistic plane. And I always say, okay, what spirituality do you? They answer, what's the altruistic plane? Well, I help somebody. I do nice things for people. Okay, that's great. But that's not actually the definition of altruism. The definition of altruism, which is what our solution to the malady is unselfishly devoting yourself to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others. How do you unselfishly devote your life to that, or time and welfare to that, to help other people? You do altruistic actions based in selfishness to start. And as you do altruistic action based in self, because I don't want to die, or because, whatever the reason, eventually you gain in altruism, and down the road you're doing this without thinking, without reservation. Usually before we help somebody, there's always a reservation. Oh, fuck. What do I got to do? How's this going to affect me? Blah, blah, blah. But down the road, it's just like, you just do it, right? So those 3 things, and I tell them the rest of this program will emphasize these 3 aspects, and then I kind of highlight that. Jesse goes through the book and doesn't open the next page ever. And it opens up as per like it's supposed to, in a sense. I will open up other aspects of the book before we get there, and bring certain aspects in, and that's a big difference between what we do. But at the end of the day, the big book talks about 50% get sober at once, 25% with some relapses, and the other 25% live a better quality of life with drinking. At the end of the day, he gets the 50, 60, 70% get sober at once with some relapses possibly, and that's what I get. So at the end of the day, when we look at intelligent agent data collection, what we're doing is very effective. And again, it's all comes back to the book, not theory, not what other people think or say. What it says in the book, in the black and the white. And then the other part that we kind of really work with that other people try to call us out on. Well, where does it say no having relationships in the first year? This is one we talked about recently, because people are always trying to combat that, right? But it's usually not the person we're working with. it's
everybody else.
Everybody else.
Fucking everybody else.
Right. So where I kind of get around that is our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter, right? Yeah. And so for us, as we've sponsored the numbers that we have, we've grown in these areas. We've collected the data. Why do we collect the data and implement these strategies? So we can be spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation. So we can help bring more love into the world. So we can help people be more authentic with themselves so that they can be productive members in the society and be a walking big book that just lives this shit and becomes attractive to people that are non-alcoholic. And that's the real test to see how well this is working, when you're attracting people that are non-alcoholic and they want what you fucking have, right?
Just to kind of add to this, like, you know, just the speech, just this part of sponsorship here is that, you know, how the alcoholic wins the confidence of another is 4 things, right? He's not holier than thou. He knows what he's talking about. He's had the same experience. And what's the other one? And it's
his whole department.
His whole department shouts new prospect. He's a man with a real answer, right? So when you're a newer sponsor, you've had the same experience, okay? And that's immensely fucking powerful. You know, you're 3 months, let's say, and you're going to one of the houses that you went to. You no longer live that way of life. You're 3 months, which is so close to where this guy's at. He's fresh in there for a week, and holy fuck, I could have your life. I could almost have your life in 3 months. Not 10 fucking years, dude. Not even a year. 3 months. I mean, there is some conviction in that, you know? Eventually, though, there's a transition that needs to happen. Me, myself, I haven't dealt with the drink in years. Now, I could still speak to that, but the conviction that I have towards the one is spotty, depending on the guy that I'm working with. I can't draw from that like I used to be able to in my first number of years. So there's a transition that needs to happen. And that is the whole department shouts new prospect. I'm a man with a real answer. And that I obviously know what I'm talking about. Now, that has nothing to do with self, right? If I try to manufacture those 2 things and I'm not there, then I'm coming off holier than thou. You could go to many rooms in this city and you'll find a guy, generally about a year or so, and he hides behind the big book. He can't necessarily recite it, nor does he understand really what the implication of it is. Whenever he brings up the book and pieces of it, it doesn't necessarily fit what we're talking about. And when you listen to this man, you get a little bit of a gross feeling. There's something else here. This is not pure. This is self-related, right? So if you're trying to overcompensate for an education that you don't have, you will come off holier than thou. So the transition is that you start, and you've had the same experience, because the impact of that is almost, I mean, it's just as fucking good in some respects of where me and Bill can come from. Like how fucking crazy that is. That even you yourself at, you know, half a year, you know, what you know and where you've come from just in that time of actually doing the fucking deal here holds a lot of fucking power. But eventually there's that transition that needs to happen. And that's in that transition, you're no longer doing this to save your ass. You know, there's a lot of things that you had kind of mentioned that, you know, like when does that transition happen? From selfish to selfless. And this is the transition. Through God, the experience and working your own program, you are now, you know, you obviously know what you're talking about, but that is God-given. That's not manufactured. And your whole department shouts new prospect. You're a man with a real answer, right? And that's the transition. That's where me and Bill are at now today. And what I could say about that is that it's definitely more God-inspired. You know, there's not talking about self-will and sponsorship, there's the opportunity always for it as you up the station in your sponsorship. Because the simple fact is like the guys that you're getting right now, they're only going to be so serious, right? So a guy who picks you, let's say, ahead of Bill, how serious is he? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Then when you start making that transition, you start getting more and more serious guys. Because the simple fact is the guys who are picking you right now, some of them might be serious. Most of them are going to fuck around with you. But this is where you cut your teeth. This is where you start to fucking understand. This is where you start to build out that plan like Bill's talking about, right? This is where you start to get fucking boundaries. You start to get some experience. And as that's coming up, this transition starts. And so for me and Bill today, dude, like the idea that, the book will talk about, he has helped you more than you've helped him, that premise. And that premise, if that's in your sponsorship, good fucking luck. You always have to, that boundary needs to be set. I'm the fucking sponsor here, dude, and you're the fucking sponsee, right? I'm the mentor, you're the mentee. As soon as that breaks, it gets fucking crooked. Sponsorship, like any individual man, doesn't necessarily help me. That whole idea is fucking crooked, right? It's not, out of, let's say, 5 sponsees I have, it's not that one or every individual, Jimmy, fucking James, and Johnny, every individual. It's sponsorship as a fucking whole. I sponsor today because it's grooved in my life. I don't sponsor because I have to, because I'm like, holy fuck, I'm going to drink here. That's fucking long gone, brother. You know what I mean? But the conviction today does not come from the drink. The conviction today comes from the defective character. So this is why me and Bill can be so useful working with retreads and working with guys who have some fucking time that are going to blow their fucking brains out. Because that's where the conviction is today. Now, because I'm very serious on the one, just in the literature itself, I'm able to pick up maybe a little bit more newer guys than Bill is. And because he's a little bit more heavier in the 6 and 7 in the meetings, he's able to pick up not so much retreads, but more of the guys who have some time that are looking at working on the defective character. That's another slight difference. But other than that, I would say that's where that transition comes from.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so, like, I know because my sponsors told me too, like, he'll flip me to page 552 where it talks about, I think it's 552 where it says the only real freedom a human being can ever know is doing what he ought to do because he wants to do it, right? And that's kind of what you were talking about, that transition from I'm doing this as a sponsor, I'm doing this because it's required, to now I want to do this. That's altruism, right? Like I'm here not because you're helping me as much as I'm helping you, and given that, but all, like, one of the things too, and like, I'll say this and then come back to the question that you were talking about, Bill, is I'll take that opportunity and say, like, well, this is we highlight this disease of self, right? And then, like, who were we talking about the whole time in here? You know what I mean? Like, the problem comes from the guy what's stuck in self. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and use that as a kind of thing to highlight that's, the self as well. And things that are going on in the life. It's just really getting at that self, and that'll bring me to the question that, like, we talked about this last night briefly, and you guys have pretty much already answered it, and that was like, how much do we highlight at the beginning, or how much do you guys highlight at the beginning, this idea of step 12? Because I see it in the literature, like, just going forward to the first edition, there's a couple times in there, right at the doctor's opinion, which you already went to, right? And it almost, like, to me, like, attacking that or highlighting that at the start, it really, like, because my sponsor did that with me, and all of a sudden I was like, okay, like, I'm a part of something here. You know what I mean? Like, this is, and that seed's planted that this is going to be something ongoing further down the road. And that, and like you said, with the parentheses and the underlines and all that stuff, it highlights the idea that, like, the 12 steps are 12 steps. If I'm not going to sponsor somebody after I'm done this, I'm not done the 12 steps ultimately. Right. And it just kind of gears that and highlights another angle of this selflessness that needs to be required to maintain sobriety, right?
Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at BILLWARDLIFE to see everything that we have going on. We can recover. One person, one family, one community at a time.